In that wedge of the Gulf of Guinea, which is called the Gold Coast, Accra has been the port of the European trader for hundreds of years. Here came first the Portuguese and the Dutch, then the French, and finally the British. 200 miles inland is Kumasi, the capital of Ashanti. Until 1900, the chief industry was war. The Ashanti chieftains went down to besiege the forts of the European traders on the coast, or to burn one another's villages. Now all that is over. 50 years of peace, and the Gold Coast is no longer the white man's or the black man's grave. It is a British colony, moving fast towards some form of democratic government. Malaria and yellow fever have been mastered. A rich land ships manganese and timber, gold and cocoa to the rest of the world, and the colony has become a mixture of Africa and Europe. Around the stone and concrete of Kumasi grows the dazzling equatorial forest, still and seemingly watchful in the midday heat. Off the glare of the road, the African trails disappear at once into the twilight of a hothouse and lead at last to the compounds of the Ashanti cocoa farmers, who have cut clearings in the forest for their farms. The houses are built round a courtyard where the life of the family goes on. While the farmer and his men are away working, the women pound up the plantain and make it into a soft paste called fufu. Fufu for the Ashantis is what spaghetti is to the Italians, or bread to ourselves. And the sound of pestles pounding away goes on in African villages all day long. Many farmers have 2 wives, but the value of a wife in recent years has gone up from £7.10 to £25. And this has brought about a natural decline in polygamy, which is perhaps really only a method of getting extra domestic help. The second wife is known as the jealous one. The Ashantis are like village people in England or anywhere else. They go to the weekly market to buy and sell and pick up the news. They drink palm wine and talk scandal. There's cloth from Lancashire, the knives from Sheffield, pottery from Staffordshire. But side by side with them are baskets made by the Africans, pitchers and stew pots baked in the local clay, and strong, heavy blankets woven in the compounds. To eat, there are peppers and cola nuts, plantains and cassava, and dried fish which the Muslim fish peddlers have brought up from the coast. There's meat and chicken too. Food is cheap. No points, no coupons, no black market. Just the plenty we used to enjoy in Europe before we took up tribal war among ourselves. All the land in the Gold Coast is owned by the Africans. It's divided among tens of thousands of small family farmers. The farmer grows enough to keep himself, and then for the luxuries of his life, he has his cocoa crop. his wealth is certain, so long as he doesn't copy the bad example of America and cut down his forests too ruthlessly and create an African dust bowl. And so long as he has the good sense to cut out and replace any trees infected with swollen shoot, which is the mortal enemy of the cocoa tree. There are 2 cocoa harvests a year, a small one in April and May, and a larger one between October and December. In the dim lacework of light and shade in the forest, only an expert eye can tell which pods are ripe for cutting. A tree is usually the size of an apple tree, and it'll grow enough beans to make about a pound of cocoa a year. All the family, uncles and aunts, nephews and nieces, sit round and get their long knives to the husk and take out the soft, pink, juicy bean. The next stage is called fermenting. This is nature's job. The African farmer has only to reach out his hand for what he needs for his work. And the plantain tree, which has given him his fufu, also gives him the equivalent of the English farmer's straw. The huge flat leaves of this tree are stripped off, and in the leisurely fashion of people who preserve the natural rhythms of living and who have not lost the art of doing one thing at a time, the farmer's family spread the leaves on the ground and make a clamp where the beans can be left to ferment. After 4 or 5 days, when the juice is worked off, the crop will be picked up and carried off to the village and spread out on long tables to dry in the sun. When we were fighting the Ashantis years ago, we knew very little about the customs of Ashanti life. Nowadays, we've learned the wisdom of ruling through their chieftains and of trying to build up what is important in their way of life. In 1935, the present king of Ashanti was, as they say, installed with the title of Prempeh II. Installed because he's the guardian of the sacred golden stool, which is the emblem of their race. Every few years, the governor of the Gold Coast calls a derba, a great ceremonial gathering, when the king of Ashanti and the chiefs of all the towns and villages come in from their territory to meet the representatives of the British king. When the proclamation is made, King Prempeh sends out the governor's invitation to all his chiefs. The call goes out to every part of Ashanti, and the councils of elders gather round the excited chiefs to hear the news. The The villagers wake up to the tune of dances and to the speech of the old talking war drums of the country. Those drums are saying ancient words. Ashanti porcupines who came from Cuba's womb, touch your powder belts and gather, gather, gather. That is the message of the drums. But it no longer calls the Ashanti warriors to arms. These are drums for a holiday. New tunes are taking a place with the old drum language of the tribes. The band of the Gold Coast Regiment has an important part to play in the derba, and they have trickier tunes than the drum tunes to play. These men have seen something of the world beyond Africa. They fought in the First World War. They fought again in Burma only a few years ago. Ashanti life, like all tribal life, is rich in ceremony, and the people naturally love the ritual, gaudiness and display of a derba. For the police, it's a tremendous traffic problem. For the chieftains march in with thousands of followers to Kumasi for the celebrations. Perhaps the followers will celebrate too much with palm wine. Perhaps the crowds will get overexcited and swarm over the ceremonial park. So before the day begins, they go over the details with a European officer. At last, the chiefs set out on their journey. The great day has arrived. All the drums are beating. They beat their way through strings of verses which go on and on like hymn tunes. For example, when the chief gets into his litter, the drums warn the people that he mustn't be allowed to stumble. In the old days, if he did stumble, a slave was killed on the spot to appease the evil spirit. Rise, 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 little by little, carefully, carefully. Take care you do not stumble. Ohene, let us go forward. The sky is wide, wide, wide. The earth is wide, wide, wide. The one was lifted up, the other was set down in ancient times, long, long ago. And out march the police. The intellectuals lead. Those who can read and write wear boots and march out first. Those who cannot wear the red fez and follow barefoot. For miles, the chiefs are being bumped along through the heat and dust, and their ceremonial umbrellas toss and twirl in the streets of the capital. They are twirled round and round with the double purpose of fanning the chief in the blazing heat and of driving away the evil spirits. The importance of a chief is measured by the size and splendor of his umbrellas. The state swords are raised. Their handles are bound with leopard skin and gold leaf. Every man has his part: the interpreters, sandal bearers, drum bearers, shield bearers, gun bearers, and the elephant tail switchers. He is coming, he is coming, little by little, slowly, say the drums. The great man. That little by little, slowly, is very important in Ashanti, because the more important you are, the more tradition requires you to keep people waiting. And this time they are waiting for the greatest of all, Prempeh, the royal of royals, and his court. After the king comes the Queen Mother, who is borne along by her servants. At one time, the Queen Mother was the most important person in Ashanti, where the position of women has always been powerful. She has the right to keep the king waiting. In the belief of the Ashantis, only the female transmits the literal blood to her children, and they inherit through her and not through their father. It is the brother of the wife and not the husband who is the head of the family. Yet the king is called grandfather by the people. Good morning, grandfather, they say to him. Chiefs arrive on the derba ground and take their places in a huge semicircle. Everyone is waiting for the arrival of the British King's representative, His Excellency, the Governor of the Gold Coast. The band of the Gold Coast Regiment marches on, and the governor, in full ceremonial uniform, hardly less colorful than the robes of the Ashanti chiefs, enters the derba ground. This great Ashanti derba has begun. The derba is held on open ground in Kumasi, and all the notables of Ashanti are there. Handshaking ceremony, and the governor has to visit each chief in turn in his little court. The frank African eye, gracious and lively, meets the still, discreet eye of the European for a moment, and the climax of the long journey through the bush has been reached. Then, it's part of the ceremony, the chiefs return the governor's visit. They come weighed down by their golden regalia, wearing all their riches, slowly walking, some held up by an attendant to protect them from the ill luck of stumbling. And at the dais, they bare their shoulders in salutation. Follows chief, the eager, the shy, the grave, the talkative, and each pays his duty, until King Prempeh comes forward. Behind him, his bearers are carrying the sacred golden stool. Honor and symbolism are at the heart of Ashanti life. These processions are not just ordinary, excited crowds. Each man, from the king to his bearers, each woman, from the Queen Mother to the two girls who were born along in the traveling court as emblems of virginity, each has a part to play. And when the Queen Mother herself is presented to the governor, the act is symbolical of the importance of women in a country where inheritance is through the mother and not the father. Prempeh is a modern king. The new language of the loudspeaker has taken the place of the formal, poetic speech of the drums. He doesn't call the Ashanti porcupines to war, but he talks about the new Legislative Council. One of the things he wants is a new non-sectarian secondary school, like the famous one at Achimota, where 500 Africans, chiefs' sons and the sons of villagers, are trained in the delicate dovetailing of European and African life. When he has finished speaking, he hands to the governor a copy of what he has said. In his reply, the governor tells the people what is being done to build schools and to widen representative government. His speech is just as practical as King Prempeh's, and the Africans are listening closely to the official words. The great Ashanti derba is over. The governor says goodbye to King Prempeh and drives back to his residence in Accra. The drums are silent now, and King Prempeh's people are back at their farms, looking after the beans fermenting under the plantain leaves, or raking them over on the long tables where they have been drying in the baking sun. The farmer is watching the color of the beans, and when they are dark enough and dry enough, he gives the order to bag them up and send them down to the depot. The fierce warriors of Ashanti have become rich on growing half the cocoa of the world and giving us our mildest drink. In that tropical climate, they themselves prefer something cooler. The buyer down at the village takes a sample. And this is an anxious moment for the farmer. The price he'll get and the money he'll make hangs on the quality of his crop and reflects the skill of his farming. He may want to buy more goats and pigs or a motor car. Perhaps he has a son who wants to be a doctor or a daughter dreaming of the university and a teaching career. There is a government-set standard of quality, and the method of sampling is to split the beans open and set them out on what looks like a draft board. It is really a board divided into 100 squares, which makes it easy to work out the percentage of doubtful beans. When this has been settled, the sacks are sewn up, the farmer gets his money, and the beans are loaded up on a lorry which will blaze down the hot motor road to the coast at a steady 40. Down at the warehouses of Accra, where once the slaves were loaded in the ships, the cocoa is taken out by the famous longshoremen of the Guinea coast. For centuries, these men have been a class apart, famous for their strength and their seamanship. They can lift huge weights, and they work fast, because they are paid by the boatload. perfect time, driving the trident-shaped paddles they have always used, they race to the ship that waits for their cargo. More loads mean more pay. First there, the first away. And so back to the shore for the next load, and for the harvest that has brought wealth the warrior farmers never dreamed of. Wealth greater even than the gold which gave their country its name.